Your body was never built to do this. Every day past your mid-30s, you are, biologically speaking, running on borrowed time. Evolution had exactly one job: get you to reproduce and keep your kids alive long enough to reproduce too. After that, you are supposed to be gone, recycled, off the books. And yet, here you are, decades past your reproductive peak, watching a video about why your knees hurt. That should sound wrong. If evolution is this ruthless optimization machine that spent 4 billion years perfecting eyeballs, immune systems, and the exact spring loading of a cheetah's spine, how did it completely whiff on aging? How did the same process that gave you stereo vision and a thumb that can text and hold a coffee cup at the same time leave your cells to slowly, chaotically fall apart with no backup plan? Here's the uncomfortable answer. It didn't whiff. It never even tried. And once you understand why, you will never think about getting old the same way again. Let's start with the animal you're not supposed to compare yourself to, but should. Almost nothing in the wild ages the way humans do. A salmon reproduces once and dies days later, its body basically dissolving on schedule, like a video game NPC despawning after its one quest. A wild mouse is lucky to see its first birthday before a hawk, a fox, or a bad winter ends the conversation. Most wild animals don't get old. They get eaten, starved, or frozen first. Death by predator or famine arrives so reliably that death by worn-out biology almost never gets the chance to show up. Humans broke that deal. Somewhere in the last few 100,000 years, we got smart enough to dodge the predators, build the shelters, cook the food, and treat the infections that used to cap our lifespans early. We hacked the environment before evolution had any reason to hack the aging process. So now we're stuck with hardware that was optimized for a 50-year test run, except we kept the warranty going for 80, 90, sometimes over 100 years. This is what scientists call an evolutionary mismatch, a gap between the world your biology was built for and the world you're actually living in. And nowhere is that mismatch more obvious than in the simple, brutal fact that your reproductive years end decades before you do. Which, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, is bizarre. Menopause is almost unheard of anywhere else in nature. A handful of whale species get it, humans get it. That's basically the list. Most female animals stay fertile until they die. So why would natural selection let human women live 30, 40 years past the point where they can have more children? Shouldn't evolution just not bother keeping you around? This is where things get interesting, and where the grandmother hypothesis walks in. The idea, broadly, is that an older woman who stops having her own children but starts helping raise her grandchildren can boost her genetic legacy more by mothering the mothers than by having one more risky pregnancy herself. Extra hands gathering food, extra eyes watching toddlers, extra decades of hard-won survival knowledge. All of it makes the grandkids more likely to survive to adulthood and pass on shared genes. In other words, grandma isn't a biological afterthought. She might be one of the reasons humans evolved a long post-reproductive life in the first place. It's not the full explanation, and researchers are still arguing about how much weight it can carry, but it's a genuinely elegant clue. Sometimes evolution keeps you around, not because you can still reproduce, but because you can help other people's reproduction succeed. But why we stick around and why we fall apart while we're here are two very different questions, and the answer to the second one is where evolution starts looking less like a caring engineer and a lot like a landlord who stops returning your calls the second the lease is up. It comes down to a concept called antagonistic pleiotropy, which sounds like a spell from a wizard exam, but is actually a fairly simple, fairly dark idea. Some genes do double duty. They help you in youth and quietly sabotage you in old age. And because natural selection can only see traits that affect reproduction, a gene that makes you thrive at 25 and fall apart at 65 will still get passed on. Nobody's checking the fine print.
Imagine a stock trader who guarantees you massive returns for the first 10 years of your portfolio, then vanishes with no forwarding address the moment the real bill comes due. That's a huge chunk of your own biology. Testosterone, for instance, can sharpen muscle and drive in youth while quietly stacking the odds toward cardiovascular problems and certain cancers decades later. Genes that build an aggressively responsive immune system in your 20s can tip that same system into chronic, low-grade inflammation in your 60s. Basically, evolution handed you a body with the financial planning of a lottery winner. Spend everything now, worry about the consequences never. Evolution isn't cruel, it's just profoundly indifferent. It only ever graded on one test. Did you reproduce? Nobody handed you a copy of the answer key for what happens after. And this is exactly where the modern world turns a manageable design flaw into a full-blown crisis. Because on top of an already imperfect body, we've changed almost everything about how that body lives, and evolution has had zero time to catch up. You are, quite literally, running ancient software on modern hardware. Take sugar and fat. Your brain still treats them like rare, precious survival resources worth chasing at any cost, because for nearly your entire evolutionary history, they were. Now, they're in every vending machine on every floor of every building you'll ever work in. Or take movement. Your body still expects the kind of daily physical exertion that came from hunting, foraging, walking miles just to eat. Instead, it gets a chair, a commute, and a couch. 3 surfaces that between them account for most of a modern human's day. Then there's your immune system, and this one deserves a second look, because it's genuinely strange. It still runs threat detection tuned for parasites, open wounds, and filthy water, the actual dangers your ancestors faced daily. But those threats mostly disappeared, so instead of firing in short, useful bursts, it now spends decades in a kind of permanent, low-grade fury at nothing in particular, quietly attacking processed food residue, disrupted sleep, stress hormones, and its own tissue almost by accident. Imagine a smoke detector that never sees actual smoke again, so it just starts beeping softly, all day, every day, forever. That chronic simmer even has its own nickname, inflaming. Inflammation that doesn't come from an infection, but seems to quietly accelerate a huge share of what we call aging. And then there's sleep. Your body's internal clock evolved around actual darkness and actual sunrise. Instead, it now gets hijacked nightly by a rectangle of blue light you willingly hold 6 inches from your face. None of these mismatches are individually fatal. Together, over decades, they're like slowly overclocking a computer that was never built to run this hot for this long. So, quick recap. You live way past your reproductive peak, your genes actively work against you once you're done reproducing, and modern life keeps stress testing a system built for a completely different environment. Bleak, sure, but at least it's a coherent story. Except, wait, if evolution really stopped caring the second you had kids, why does aging happen on such a predictable, almost engineered-looking schedule at all? Random damage should be, well, random, messy. Different in every single person, every single organ, on no particular timetable. But it isn't. Hair grays in roughly the same decade across wildly different diets and lifestyles. Skin elasticity, bone density, hormone levels, they all shift on eerily similar curves across almost the entire species. That doesn't sound like an unlucky pile of accumulated damage. It sounds suspiciously like a schedule. And that wait, but is a real fault line running straight through the science, not a rhetorical trick to keep you watching, though sure, it's also doing that. One camp argues aging is essentially programmed, a built-in biological process shaped by evolution that actively winds cells down on a semi-fixed timeline, maybe to limit resource competition between generations, maybe to control population size, maybe for reasons we haven't even guessed at yet. The opposing camp argues aging is the accumulation of unrepaired damage, mutations, misfolded proteins, cellular garbage the body's cleanup crews simply can't keep pace with over enough decades. No grand design required, just entropy winning slowly. Both camps have real data. Both camps have real holes in their theories. And right now, honestly, nobody fully knows which one is more correct, or whether the true answer is some tangled combination of both. Scientists are still arguing about this in journals, at conferences, occasionally in footnotes that read suspiciously like subtweets of each other. Anyone who tells you aging is fully solved and settled is skipping past one of the biggest open questions left in biology. Here's the part that should actually stick with you. Picture your body as an old car with a check engine light that's been programmed at the factory to switch on around a certain mileage, whether or not anything's actually broken yet. If aging really is partly programmed like that, then somewhere in you is an actual dial, not a metaphor, an actual biological switch that evolution set decades ago for its own reasons and never bothered to explain. Nobody's saying you can reach in and crank it, but a dial that was set can in theory be studied and maybe someday understood, the same way you'd eventually figure out why the check engine light comes on even in a car that runs fine. And if aging is mostly rust instead of a dial, mostly damage quietly piling up in the wheel wells and the undercarriage year after year, then every mismatch we just walked through, the vending machine, the couch, the smoke detector that won't stop beeping, the phone 6 inches from your face, isn't just background noise. It's more rust added faster than your ancient hardware ever budgeted for. Either way, the uncomfortable truth is the same. Your body isn't betraying you out of nowhere. It's running exactly the program natural selection wrote for it in a garage natural selection never signed off on. You are not falling apart because something went wrong. You're falling apart because nothing was ever built to go right past a certain point, and modern life is leaning on the accelerator the entire way there. That's either the most depressing sentence in this script or the most useful one, depending entirely on what you decide to do with it. This channel exists to keep digging into questions exactly like this one, the weird, uncomfortable, occasionally absurd story of why your body is quietly running ancient software in a modern world it was never built for. If you want to keep finding out what other bugs are hiding in the code, subscribe, because we're only just getting started.